Hello, and thanks for joining us for episode 51 of Cybeats Powerhouse Perspectives. With us today is Melissa Rhodes, who has been down a long path like all the folks we talk about. And Melissa, all the folks we have all these meetings with every day, I swear to God, just, if it didn't cost too much, I would pay to do this for a living, right? Just, and you, like, a long time of systems engineering and medical devices and all that other stuff and dealing with all the other idiots like me around you, who are trying to get this done or that done. And, pulling that thread, since we're working together in the supply chain security thing, which to me just means transparency and being really clear about what you all said you were going to do, it forces that issue, right? Everything's connected. So, hi, anyways, where in the world are you?
Well, geographically, I'm in Minnesota, and I work at Medtronic, and I'm in the product security office with a long history, like you said, in system engineering, building cardiac devices and systems. So, but I switched over to product security over 2 years ago now, bringing that systems thinking, and it is interesting how bringing that thinking has shifted my group's thinking a bit as well.
Well, before I make too many Douglas Adams reference, you familiar with Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is more popular, but I love it. It's a detective who just does random things because everything's connected, and somehow you figure things out. And and Anthony, if you roll that first question, right? Looking back, right, as we like to do here, right? So in your path and all of this, on the general topic of transparency, right? Whether it's intergroup, interpersonal, technical, policy, however, right? I think, if I'm not wrong, I think systems engineering is another particular perspective that lends itself to this, because you can't walk into a meeting and say, sure, without pointing out the other related thing, right? So looking all the way back, was it better or worse as you sort of worked through that? Was it easier in the system engineering world, or was it easier, a couple of decades ago? Or
no, I think that especially in the medical device field, we have found that there's been a maturity curve to that, right? So for a long time, it was hard. It took a lot of oomph to be transparent, because if you are transparent, then you might get in trouble in the outside world, right? Or with outside of your company. And it took a while for us, and enough lumps at Medtronic to realize that transparency and humility and trying to do the right thing and bringing that to the table was super important, not only with regulatory agencies, but also with our customers and with our patients. So I know that there are lots of medical device companies that are going through those same lumps, but we seem to be a little ahead of the curve and trying to bring transparency of what we bring to the world.
Well, frankly, I can vouch for that. I mean, because I know you and we're in the same groups together, right? I've seen this. I've been around this merry-go-round often enough to see this same sort of phenomenon. When something's right and really it's time and it's catching on, it tends to be a small group, then a bigger group, then it finally goes into the world. And I think it's safe to say right now that the people who are showing up at this system work groups or whatever they are, their companies tend to be ahead of everybody else. And as a interested observer, it's interesting to see some of the predictions and unpredicted things turning out. It's like, we're doing it for security or maybe compliance or whatever, but no, and actually it lowers our costs. We have better customer relationships, right? In the medical space, when I first got into security, early 90s, I knew nothing about anything. I mostly, talked to normal companies. I remember the first hospital I talked to, and just thinking out loud, is like, oh my God, let me see, you have teaching hospitals, so you have the students on the inside and patients and life support systems. It's a mess, right? And I think you touched on this, intellectual, well, one of your comments made me think of this, intellectual property. I mean, how many stakeholders do you have, much less the person hooked up to the actual device, but the company that develops it and the people behind that, and you embed that in this IT/OT fungible mess of a network.
Mm-hmm.
And the old school view, as I've seen it, interesting your thoughts, is no, we got to keep that safe. We got to lock that down. But in this
Mm-hmm.
massively connected world, I guess the point I'm not making, taking a long time getting to, is the medical space has always been over massively connected, literally technically connected and over connected with people and interests. Has that helped maybe force that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It does force things. It's more high stakes, right? I mean, we're in so with some products, a good number of products, in fact, we impact people's quality of life, right? So our systems and our products can have a huge ripple impact if found exploitable with a vulnerability, and those. So it's really important to stay in front of those things. But I would say that it's also been a shift in culture, because one of the things I can't speak for all companies, but in my experience, medical device companies develop medical innovations, and then they want to go on to the next innovation, and so to try and understand what legacy technical debt we have has been quite a process, and trying to get our leadership aligned. And I feel like I absolutely think we have, but it's been a whole process to make it happen, in order to be able to get our leadership aligned and get them supportive of getting our technical debt known and aligned on making strides at being transparent and being able to bring all of what we find to um, triage, to disclosure eventually if it needs to be disclosure, because honestly, we also don't want to ring the bell when it doesn't need to be rung. So
Well, exactly right, and I know that first question, if that was too obscure, for the average viewer out there, the question, as a young system engineer, is it necessary to put all this stuff together? And I think you really have, and it's a good point, Anthony. Question number two, if you don't mind. So we're looking at the present. This is one of these waves, where it's like getting on the internet or getting firewalls in the security space, adopting SIM or whatnot. In the early days, you can say, look, everyone on earth is going to do this. You can choose to do it sooner or later.
mm-hmm.
And maybe doing it sooner has a cost, or maybe it's an opportunity. Who knows? But to me, when security stuff starts to line up with lower costs, higher profitability, higher productivity, competitiveness, better adoption, that takes the security issue stand up on its head. If medical device manufacturers, pick one of any number of suppliers in the medical system, can by 1 or 5%, lower the barriers to adoption to new technology by shortening procurement cycles, because in SBOM specifically, and I've heard this from one of the major grid operators just last week, right? That they're requiring SBOMs because it shortens the time it takes them to pen test products.
Absolutely.
Which saves them money, and they get a better assurance. Achieve trust faster. Reduce the time to transparency. So, so I've seeded my own thoughts on this. I'm interested in yours, but I think we're at the point now where we're proving this isn't about security. It's not about just fixing vulnerabilities. It's about being more efficient and effective, and that's when things get adopted.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So yes, I shouldn't have said no. Yes, I totally agree. I guess it's so interesting to think about, and we've been forced, in order to make alignment with our leadership, we're forced to look at the ROI. What's the return on the investment for doing this work and building up teams and deploying tools, and because it is an investment to do all of this work in order to assure ourselves and our customers that our products are secure. And then breaches in security aren't always impacts on safety, but that translation can be made between security and safety enough times that it could be a significant problem. So that's the soft ROI. The hard ROI is we are going to save ourselves post-development work, things that are already in the market and need to have full teams spin up and make patches and make, because we already have cadence development teams in place, but if people need to do urgent patches, that's a very significant cost actually. So,
Right.
Having to develop that ROI argument and make sure that leadership is aware and actually is coming along with us in our history, like, okay, this is where we saw unexpected costs come through. And this is, as vulnerabilities increase and as our understanding of our products and their vulnerabilities increase, this is only going to get bigger. It's only going to mushroom.
Right, and that's and that's where you think about this conversation, the systems engineering sort of approach, that holistic, everything's connected. It may take a while, and sometimes in our experience, it takes decades, to move these big ships. But the fundamentals up. I've always loved OT as opposed to IT because it's pragmatic. We're gonna have a long-term plan. Power plants take a long time to build. And among those sectors, maritime is a lot of fun because it's a cartoon. You can't stand next to a burning ship, right? Like you can a burning factory. And then there's medical. Medical has always caused people to just pause. It's like, well, is it OT? I mean, I guess it is. And now we're, over my career, we were literally embedding the devices inside the human beings with Bluetooth connections. And we should, because we'll save lives and so forth. And I think this, anyway, I think I'm broad sociological. I think this is free speech and democracy and open source at the end of the day, right? Throw capitalism in. I believe as a company, it's like really good to be transparent. In the Jim, blanking on his last name, from Siemens, talking about the healthcare POC and the SBOM in the Department of Commerce days. He's explaining that to the energy sector for their POC. And the most thing that struck me most is he explained, the sort of findings, and then he sort of paused and just said contemporaneously, and it really basically just gave us better customer relationships, right? Because that matters, right? And that's money, it's time.
That's his last name.
Jacobson. Yes, thank you very much. Jacobson. Sorry, Jim. So
we both love you.
right. It's just there's a lot of my brain isn't actually good with it's like people think I'm really good with names. I'm not. This is a hack. We all hack ourselves, so forth. I'm really bad with names. But Anthony, the last question. So looking out forward, right? And again, thinking of where you want. But I think with your background and the thread you've taken through, this career to date, where we are right now, seeing arguably these benefits. Will we make it? Right? Doctor, is do you think all this, open source transparency, open systems, open standards, is this really going to drive us to, frankly, I think we have some medical utopias ahead of us. I may be a bit old to experience some of them, but I think my kids and so forth are going to see medical systems that would make our current science fiction look crazy, which we can have if you and I can't fix the cybersecurity side of it.
It's true. I guess what my thoughts are is we just have to, one of the concepts that I've really grasped onto and I'm starting to really tout strongly is secure by default, which is a total systems idea. You come at all of your designs in terms of, okay, what is the default most secure state or configuration that this system can be in? And then making sure that you're producing that. Now, when you get to, producing secure by default for legacy devices, that gets tricky, but definitely with new products, you can come at it from that point of view. And then it doesn't become its own little island of capability. That's one of the things that I think is going to make this more achievable, is if we actually pull security into our security by default design creations, conceptions, ideation. And rather than thinking it's something that you apply later down the road within your development phase.
Well, honestly, you really struck me with that one, right? From a systems perspective, there should be somewhere, in the future, a period where you don't have a security team.
Right.
Because that's the way you do it, right? You only build code that way. You only build a medical device that way. And I think that's probably inevitable at some point, right? It may take a while to get there, but yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, you might still need a security team that can like think like a hacker, because I know that coming from R&D, I don't easily think like a hacker. I think like a builder. And so we've talked about that in my team quite a bit, you know, the difference in thinking, and that some people can cross over and do both, but you know, you have builders, you have breakers, and then, you know, sometimes those crossover. But you need your breaker profiles in order to be able to also build a threat model and be able to work that through and make sure that your product is secure by design, as well as the system engineers working to make sure it's secure by default, meaning that the configurations that you're actually deploying it in are by a default secure. And if somebody wants to go in with their security knowledge and change that configuration because they, on the consumer side, on the customer side, you know, that's then their risk. But it's just something to think about.
Well, you know, and early this, in 2020 or so, I decided to say out loud, you know, I think the 20s is the last decade of cybersecurity, partly just to, you know, cause trouble, and also because I kind of think so. You know, you're giving me, you know, thoughts on this as well, like what comes after that, because immediately people say, well, there's still going to be conflicts. Like, yes, but I don't think we're going to suddenly yet again go, oh, threat intelligence. Oh, we never thought of that. You know, security management. We never thought of that. You know, it's like at a certain point you run out of things we've never thought of, and we get into a different maturity level in the whole thing. So what does a security team actually look like when, honestly, so much of the fun of the time our careers covers is it is unbaked, is it is a human story. You know, we literally have to sit down with other people, explain why. And someday, you know, it'll turn out that it's too high risk, too expensive. You can't run a team that way anyways. Nobody develops secure code. But you're right. There's always going to be security people. There's always going to be conflict. But it really will kind of be a different world.
I mean, honestly, I think the idea of being a breaker or a hacker is super interesting, because you're always looking for that sneaky way in, right? So
Right.
We're never going to get in front of that completely.
Well,
I don't.
as a systems person, you know, this is, you know, people always ask me, like, were you a hacker as a kid? And first half of my career, I said no until I really thought about it. It's like, yes, where you just watch how things are working and find out that if you stand right here until they pass and walk in there, you get access to this whole, you know, the back of a hotel or whatever, right? So
Yep.
yeah,
Natural.
Well, thank you very much for all you do, all the world, spending the time with us here today. Thanks for representing Minnesota. Woo-hoo. Right? Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. I feel honored to be asked, and I hope you enjoy your day on the. Are you on a river?
Biscayne Bay. I'm on the salt water. Yeah.
There you go. Enjoy it.
It's a hard life. Thank you. We'll too. Everybody else, have a good day. Cheers.